In this video, we'll be providing a deeper look at the AgilePoint design environment where we have full support for all layers of an application, including UI, logic, and data. So let's get started understanding the data component. And for this, AgilePoint provides a built-in native data designer where I can add columns to a table through point and click, and also use generative AI or an Excel sheet upload to create my table. To create a table manually, I would first select from the appropriate data type, where I have more than a dozen to choose from. Select my data type, provide a display name, and an internal name is automatically generated, and various field configuration options depending upon the data type selected. As you can see, AgilePoint provides an entity relationship diagram where I can define relationships between tables visually, a data view so that as my applications run, I'm collecting data which sets the table for the use of AI when my organization is ready. Deep support for permissioning, both at a design time and a runtime perspective, and the ability to perform impact analysis. In other words, if I were to change this table, which AgilePoint applications might be impacted. And as you can see, AgilePoint provides an audit trail which gives me full visibility for all changes to the table from a design time and runtime perspective. So with that, let's move into AgilePoint's process builder, where I have more than 15 different process patterns to compose my application and more than 1,200 building blocks, which enable someone even with modest skills to compose applications of any complexity. Taking a look at our building blocks, we have more than 1,200 here available on the left-hand side. And what you're seeing at the moment are eForms. In other words, whenever I need human participation as a part of an application. Now, AgilePoint provides lots of these standard task types for task allocation and user interface creation within and external to an organization. From an integrations point of view, AgilePoint provides more than 120 abstracted connectors into leading enterprise cloud and on-premises systems. So scrolling through the list here, you're going to see various relational databases, both cloud and on-prem, robotic process automation, digital signature, document repositories, as well as leaders in categories like CRM and ERP. So think of Salesforce, Dynamics, NetSuite, and SAP. Now, to give you a sense of how this would work, let me grab a system that just about everyone is familiar with. So from the list, I'm going to select Salesforce, and this is fairly representative of the way that AgilePoint approaches integration. By that I mean going well beyond your basic create, read, update, and delete. With Salesforce, there are more than 25 actions within this integration alone, allowing me as a non-expert in this system to leverage it to create complex applications. So for instance, if I wanted to create a record, I would grab it, drop it onto my design canvas, and follow the configuration wizard until I've reached my desired behavior. So as a first step, I will select how I'm going to connect to Salesforce. These are connection strings that are permission driven both at design and runtime. And then from here, the table or object that I'd like to work with. So here you can see I've customized my CRM system, which will give no problems to AgilePoint. And then from here, it's a very straightforward visual mapping. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I have my harmonized data set coming from multiple different systems. On the right-hand side is my external system. So now it's a straightforward visual mapping to harmonize data across Salesforce. So I would map name to name, address to address, phone to phone, and etc. Now, in the case of Salesforce, it is going to give me an ID in response whenever I create a record, which I could then map back to a temporary AgilePoint process variable. Now, in this particular application, you're noticing various branches for our business logic. So as an example, opening up one of the conditions, which really enables those 15 different process patterns that I mentioned, as you can see here, it's going to be visually defined. So in my case, I'm evaluating a field on the form called finance approval. If that equals to yes, then the process will continue on. But in the case of more advanced logic requirements, I can always add multiple rules and chain them together, as well as change the operators as you're seeing here on screen. And then lastly, from a task allocation perspective, this will also be visually configured. So as an example, here for this particular activity, I've associated a user interface to this particular task. I'll give this task a display name so that when it shows up in my task list, it is descriptive and easily understood, as well as a time to complete. And then from here, who will be completing the work at this particular stage? So here, AgilePoint has support for users, groups, and roles, including a number of variables for, say, a requester's manager, as an example. But I can also assign this task dynamically, such as based on an external, for example, based on an external lookup. Okay, so let's move in to the user interface builder. This is a responsive HTML5 interface builder where I build once and consume on any device or any orientation, even in the event that I am offline. Now, to actually compose the interface, AgilePoint gives me more than 75 UI building blocks to build the interface and validate inputs. So, as an example, scrolling through the list, you're going to see things like radio buttons, drop-down lists, attachments, and links. Whereas if I go under the advanced controls, they're going to become a little more specific. So for instance, if I wanted to enter a phone number, is that a local number dialed internationally? An email, which will ensure that we have a username at domain.com format, social security, credit cards, and things of that nature. So I don't need to go to JavaScript for every field on my form. I can leverage the configurable validation that AgilePoint provides out of the box. So let's give you a sense of how a lookup might be created. So here, I'm going to drag and drop a data grid, which is typically one of the more challenging controls to work with. And over the next 10 seconds or so, I'm going to wire up a live integration with an external system. So I'm selecting a lookup list. I'd like to make this bidirectional, where not only can I retrieve the records, but I can also modify them. You're seeing here all of the various systems that support a multi-column lookup. I'll select how I want to connect. So in this case here, we're going to create a lookup for leads, and I'd like to make this multiple columns. Okay, we'll look up against the lead object. And then here, I'll simply select the columns that I'd like to expose in my grid. So we'll go with name, company, and address. Now I could have applied a where clause or filter, but for the sake of time and making this video short, let's go ahead and close the lookup configuration. And as you're seeing here, I can simply span the entire column all the way across to make the best use of available real estate. And from a testing perspective, all of my tools are integrated directly here into the designer. So in a matter of a few moments, I've now configured a bidirectional integration at the UI level. Okay, as a last step here, I want to quickly touch on AgilePoint's rules capabilities, where I can define rules at the individual field level as well as the entire form with full support for various events. So as an example, if I wanted to create a rule is equal to some variable, then down below there are various actions that can be enacted when the condition is met, such as showing or hiding controls and making my form dynamic and displaying the relevant data to the user, execute scripts or methods, set dates, show messages to the user, as well as trigger lookups. And again, I can always chain these rules together or add multiple rules to satisfy more demanding use cases. Okay, so with that, you now understand the high-level building blocks that I have at my disposal to create an AgilePoint application.